Hello students, today we will be discussing about one more concept in the law of sea in unit 3 of your syllabus, that is the concept of high sea and freedom on high seas. Many a times questions are asked even on this. In today's class we will be discussing about the important provisions in the United Nations Convention on Law of Sea of 1982, in which few specific provisions have been made as to what constitutes high sea, what are the important freedoms enjoyed by different states on high sea, and further, what are the limitations on those freedoms, and further, duties of states whenever they are in they are on high sea. So these are a few important concepts which we will be studying in detail in today's class. First of all, the meaning of high sea. Of course, the meaning of high sea has changed from time to time, and as of now, the most authoritative provisions under international law dealing with the meaning of high sea can be found in Article 86 of the United Nations Convention on Law of Sea of 1982. In this article, it specifically gives an indication as to what constitutes high sea and what is excluded from this. So let us see the meaning of this term. So it is that part of the sea. It is part of that sea not included in the exclusive economic zone. The first part, if at all any portion of the sea is part and parcel of this exclusive economic zone of any state, then it is not going to be treated as high sea. It is that part of the sea not included in the exclusive economic zone of a state, or it is not a territorial water, a territorial sea of any state, or it is not internal water of any state, and finally, it should not be an archipelagic water of an archipelagic state. So these are the excluded portions. If at all a sea is part and parcel of any of these four, if it is part of a exclusive economic zone of a state, or if it is part and parcel of a territorial sea of a state, or if it is part and parcel of a internal water of a state, or if it is an archipelagic water of an archipelagic state, then in these portions of sea are not considered as high sea. Apart from this, if whatever we see we find, that is considered as high sea under Article 86 of United Nations Convention on Law of Sea of 1980. So, in fact, this provision negatively describes as to what is high sea. If a portion of a sea constitutes part and parcel of any of these four, what we find on the slide, any of these four, then it is not considered as a high sea. If it is to be considered a high sea, it should not be part and parcel of this. That is the way in which we understand this concept of high sea. Moving further is archipelagic state. That is the last part of this meaning of sea. This, let us just have a look at Indonesia as a state, how it looks in the world map. Look, all this is Indonesia only. It's a cluster or it's a group of highlands. Now here, how to find out where territorial sea ends and where it starts? It's highly difficult. Further, in these portions, as you can see in the slide, so their extent may be beyond 12 nautical miles, and it may at times even be beyond even exclusive economic zone. Then what this portion of sea is considered? It is this water is also considered as archipelagic sea or waters asset. So this whole portion is going to be treated as part and parcel of Indonesia or whichever the archipelagic state. So even this is not considered as high sea, even if it is neither a part of exclusive economic zone nor it is territorial water. In fact, all these portions are considered as territorial waters only for that nation, and you cannot consider it as high sea, even though it may be beyond 12 nautical miles, beyond 200 nautical miles, because a cluster of islands, a group of islands which are netted together to constitute a state. So whatever the water comes in between these islands, even they are going to be considered as part and parcel of this territorial sea of that state. It is an internal water on which the other states have nothing to do, and it is not treated as ice. So this is with respect to the meaning of high sea. Moving further is the freedoms on high sea as provided under Article 87 of the United Nations Convention on Law of Sea of 1982. As per Article 87, a series of freedoms which all states are going to enjoy in this high sea. They are high seas are considered as entirely and fully open to all states. Once a portion of sea is treated as a high sea, then in its entirety, entirely and fully, completely, it is open to all states. Whichever state wants, it can have access to this. There cannot be any restrictions in this regard. So it is entirely and fully open to all states. No state can prevent other state from entering to this high sea or having access to high sea. It's free entirely and fully. So what are the freedoms which is going to be enjoyed by the different states? Freedom of high sea are freedom of navigation. You can have your ships and vessels can freely move on this high sea. Freedom of navigation, freedom of overflight over the space which is above the high sea, on which the aircrafts of all states can fly without any restrictions whatsoever. And further, laying submarine cables and pipelines. This is something which is of great importance in the modern era of global trade, where we will be laying down submarine cables as well as pipelines for the purpose of bringing oil, especially from one part of the globe to another part of the globe. There is possibility of laying pipelines, and for the purpose of communications and for the purpose of communication networks, even submarine cables may be of great importance. So all the states have a freedom to lay these submarines as well as pipelines on the high sea. They need not take permission of any other state. Moving further is that of construction of artificial island and other installations. Any state, if it wants, it can construct artificial islands which are made by man, and other installations like maybe for the purpose of communication towers or any other installation which is required for the lawful use of high sea. They can install such things on the high sea. These are considered as some of the important freedoms which all the states are going to enjoy on high sea. Further, fishing economic activity, it is going to be free in this area. Every state has a right to do fishing if they want in this high sea. Of course, it may not be that profitable because they will be moving very away from the mainland. So that being the case, bringing the fishing there and bringing those fishes to the shore may not be at times cost effective. I'm not very sure about that, but still it may not be that effective. So, but still they have a freedom on the high sea to do even fishing and scientific research. We know that territorial waters, exclusive economic zone, and contiguous zones, and even on the continental shelf, other states have no right to do scientific research or fishing without the permission or without the consent of the coastal state to which it is adjacent to. Whereas on the high sea, if any state wants to do some research, it can do so on the high sea, and fishing is also free in this portion. These are considered as some of the important freedoms enjoyed by all the states on high sea. Moving further is restrictions on this freedom. As we said, no freedoms are absolute. There are freedoms means ultimately freedoms comes along with some restrictions. Everywhere this is the case. So restrictions on the freedom on high sea, you have freedoms, but it's subject to few conditions, few restrictions. Let us see what those restrictions are. First one, freedom to be exercised with due regard to the interest of other states exercising the same freedom. Just as it happens with us, whenever we are living in a society, we have freedom. At the same time, our freedoms and liberties are subject to the liberties of other persons who are living along with us in the society. Same is the case with high sea. Freedom to be exercised by other states with due regard or having concern or even looking at the freedoms which can be exercised even by other states. That's an important restrictions which all the states have whenever they have whenever they are trying to exercise their freedoms on high seas. They should also give regard, they should also give respect, they should also have a look or to be concerned with even the freedoms of other states. That's an important concept. Moving further, high seas are to be reserved for peaceful purposes only. You should not use high sea for the purpose of your belligerence or for your military policies or for other reasons. You should not use high sea. High sea has to be used or it is to be reserved for peaceful purposes only. That's an important restriction on freedoms on high sea. Moving further, not subject of claim of sovereignty. No state can go there and say that I have established sovereignty over this sea. No, high sea is meant for everyone. Every state is going to have a right to access to this high sea. Therefore, no one can say that, look, here afterwards, I am forming a territory of myself. This high sea belongs to me. I am exercising effective control over them. No, you cannot do so. You don't have a right to claim sovereignty over high sea. The name itself suggests it is high sea means every state is going to have access to this high sea. So no state can claim that that portion of the high sea is something on which I have a sovereignty. It is not permissible. And states has a right to sail ships flying its flags. Every state, whether it is a landlocked state or a coastal state, every state has a right to with sail ships flying its flag. So if at all a ship has to sail on high sea, it should have a flag. Flag is going to indicate the nationality of the ship, to which nation the ship belongs to. Every state is going to have a right to sail its ship under its flag on high sea. That is an important freedom which every state enjoys along with some few conditions or few restrictions. That's with respect to restrictions on freedom on high sea. Moving further, Article 94 of the United Nations Convention on Law of Sea of 1982, it lays down few duties of flag states. Whenever we talk about flag states here afterwards, means that state under whose flag a ship is sailing on high sea. Whenever a ship is sailing on high sea under the flag of a nation, that state has some duties with respect to this sailing on high sea. What are those duties? Which are something which are provided under Article 94 of United Nations Convention on Law of Sea of 1982. Effectively exercise its jurisdiction and control its administrative, technical, and social matters over its ship. Once a ship is on the high sea, even though we don't universally accept the concept of floating island, but still, as it is not under the control or under the sovereignty of any other state, and ship considers it as part of its territory even by imagination, it has to ensure the state under whose flag the ship is sailing, that state has to effectively exercise its jurisdiction. It has to effectively exercise its jurisdiction in the matters of what? In the matters of administration, in the matters of techniques, technology, and also in the matters of in social matters. Administrative regarding its administrative aspects, technical means regarding the kind of fuel it uses, the kind of engine it is going to use, the kind of safety measures that ship has, which is uh, what seaworthiness we talk about in insurance. It should have those technical aspects to be kept in mind whenever the ship is allowed to move on, sail on I see these things have to be controlled by the state under whose flag that ship is sailing. And further social matters like that the social behavior, maybe with respect to the conduct of the people inside the ship, maybe with respect to criminal conduct or other civil matters, even on them, the state under whose flag that ship is sailing should have effective control. They cannot actually control by saying that, but even though ship is very far away from its territory, it should have such measures in place which can effectively ensure that it controls the technical, administrative, as well as social matters which are happening on the sea. That is an important duty on the state to which that ship or the vessel belongs to. Moving further, maintain proper register. Ultimately, if something goes wrong or if some problem is being created on the high sea, we should fix responsibility. We should ensure that if a dispute arises, or if someone questions them, who are they? If there is a doubt that some illegal activities are being carried out by those people on the ship, ultimately to whom the ship belongs to, such important questions are bound to arise. Then what has to be ensured by the ship is that the state has to maintain proper register of the ship. The ship has to be registered just like our vehicles are being registered with certain RTO offices. The moment we see the number of a ship, we will be in a position to find out the day of registration and the person to whom it belongs to. All these factors will be well registered as far as our vehicles are concerned. Similar should be the case even with respect to vessels and ships which are sailing on the high sea. They should maintain proper register. Who has to maintain this? The concerned state under whose flag that ship is sailing. That has to be ensured. Moving further, elaborate enumeration of steps to be taken for maintenance of safety at sea. As I said, as I mentioned just now, that seaworthiness of the ship and other safety measures to be taken for ensuring that high sea is safe. Elaborate enumeration of steps to be taken for maintenance of safety at sea has to be there in the ship. Elaborate enumeration. Clearly, it has to be mentioned, and clear steps have to be taken that the ships sailing on the ship on the sea, high sea, should not cause any damage to the sea. That has to be taken care by the state under whose flag the ship is sailing on the high sea. Moving further, public vessels and warships are completely immune from the jurisdiction of all other states. We already discussed about exemption from jurisdiction in the previous classes. Once it is a ship which is a warship, or once it is a ship which is a public vessel belong to a particular sovereign state, they are immune from the jurisdiction of all other states. None of the other states can exercise their jurisdiction in this regard. On those ships are the people, crew who are there in the ship. In this regard, you may get some doubts. One first case, the moment such a discussion happens, the first case which comes to our mind is that of Lotus case. Let us find out today through our discussion to what extent Lotus case judgment given by International Court of Justice still remains a law, or is there any contrary provisions are there under the United Nations Convention on Law of Sea of 1982. That's the next part of our discussion. So, penal jurisdiction in cases of collision or other incidents of navigation under Article 97. Under Article 97, article of UN Convention throws light on the penal jurisdiction of different states whenever some collision happens or other what we say unfortunate incident has happened on the high sea whenever whenever ships are navigating. Let us see what is the provision in this regard. So Article 97, it's a typographical error. Article 97 of the United Nations Convention negates the doctrine laid down in Lotus case. So whatever the decisions given by Lotus case justifying the decision taken by whom? Taken by this Turkish authorities in exercising jurisdiction over uh, the master of Lotus, saying that whatever they have done is wrong, and we will be exercising jurisdiction against him, and we will be taking legal steps and to arrest and punish him. This is not considered as proper by the as per the provisions of Article 97. Let us see what it says. It says that disciplinary proceedings against the master or any other person in service in a ship only can be done by the flag state of the ship. That means the state to which the ship belongs to. If at all any disciplinary and other proceedings are to be initiated against the master or any other person under the service of the ship, who has to do it? Who can do it? It has to be done, or it can be done only, such a proceedings can be taken up only by the state whose flag the ship is under which it is sailing. The flag and of the state under which the ship is sailing, only that state has a jurisdiction and not other states. Further, are by the state of which such person is a national. As we discussed in the personal jurisdiction in the previous class, if at all that master or that person under service of a ship, if he belong, he has absolutely, obviously he has to belong to some nation. So if at all that nation wants to exercise its jurisdiction on such a person, then such a jurisdiction can be exercised based on what we call as active nationality principle, what we discussed in the previous class. Moving further, no arrest or detention of detention of the ship even for the purpose of investigation other than by the flag state. If at all that ship has to be attached or it has to be on which for the purpose of investigation, all these things can be done only by that state under whose flag that ship was sailed. Other state has no jurisdiction. So whenever this question is being asked, many a times the questions are asked in your examination regarding the Lotus case. You have to explain the Lotus case, facts, the principles laid down by International Court of Justice. At the same time, you should also make a passing reference to section Article 97 of the United Nations Convention on Law of Sea, which negates the very principle laid down by this Court of International Court of Justice, which doesn't hold good as of now as for this provision. These are some of the important things which we should know as far as this high sea and the freedoms enjoyed by the states on the high seas and restrictions and duties which are also imposed along with these freedoms. So with this we conclude our class today as far as this high sea is concerned. Tomorrow or in the next session we will be discussing about the intercontinental canals and how the law, international law, regulates the movement of vessels in those canals like Panama Canal, Suez Canal. These canals, how international deals with them, and what are the restrictions or jurisdictions which can be exercised on these canals. All these things will be studied in detail in the coming class. So with this, I stop this today's session and best regards for all of you. If you have any doubts or any queries in this regard with respect to whatever the things which we discussed today's class, you are free to call me or text me regarding these clarifications. I will try my best to ensure that you get the necessary clarifications. Thanks you once again. See you.